Before we start, I want you guys to know that I've been doing this for a very long time. More important than that, I started off with nothing. 16, getting my first BMW, just washing it. That's all I could do. That's all I knew how to do. That's all I could afford. My family didn't come from car fabricators or anything like that. I just learned on my own. And from there, I just did something. The next thing was more complicated than that. I worked my way up to this, put in my time and learned how to do it one step at a time. And I finally worked my way up to this. You can do this too. I don't want anybody who watches this to be intimidated, right? I think that's only when you compare your middle to somebody else's end is when you become catatonic and frustrated and overwhelmed. But you can do this. If you have a drive and you have just a basic technical ability, you can do what I'm doing. You just need to work your way up to it. From one DIYer to another, from one enthusiast to another who wants to improve, who wants to be better. That's why I show you how I do everything that I do so that you can do it too. You know, hopefully by watching my videos that you feel that you are now better equipped or more enabled to do those things that you didn't think you could do before. For my audience, you guys that are watching, the ones who care about what I do, you're doing this because you want to be better, you want to learn more, and I hope that my channel teaches you that. And you just got to put your mind to it. I know it's a platitude, I know it's a cliche, but you can do it. You really can. Let's get into how we put this B48 into this E46, made our mounts, and got this thing sitting right. Okay. It's sitting on the subframe now, and I think that it's not really going anywhere. It's not really interfering with anything right now. But we're gonna have to lift up the engine and see how it all fits. Just put the engine cover on this just to see what it would look like. It's not quite centered, it's not quite level, but it's sitting. You know, and this is kind of like the overall location I think I want it in. And look at all of this room we have up here. Oh my gosh. You can fit almost another B48 in here. Unbelievable. So yeah, this is going to be like pretty far back is the way I want to picture this thing, especially with the 8 HP that doesn't really have any type of shifter concerns. But yeah, this is really kind of where it is. There's still stuff that needs to go up in front here. You know, you got the air intake and all that, but right now, I'm pretty happy with everything and where it's fitting. Yeah, it's angled downward right now, so we have to figure out how to prop that up in the back on the transmission, and that'll level everything off and just see how much actually things are hitting the transmission tunnel. So I might as well talk while I can here. While we're getting this car up, this is actually going to have its own set of challenges when installing the drivetrain into this car. You'd think it would be easier because it's a smaller engine, but it's got a differently designed oil pan. And that oil pan might have some interferences when you're dealing with things like the subframe. As I was saying, the subframe. And I want to try getting the 8 HP to be sitting in the same exact location as it was before. Looks like everything is sitting on its own. You can see I'm pushing it up just a tiny bit. Everything is resting nice and flat and straight. I'm not going to be making this transmission bracket really beefy. In fact, it's going to be more like the E36 or the E30 N50X brackets that I've had for the transmission. It's going to be a singular piece with 2 bolts. That's going to be more than enough to handle all the torque that the B48 can actually throw at it. Oil pan looks like it might be okay. I did shave off the subframe. There's 2 little notches. That one there, you see, this notch here remains. I know it's not focusing, I'm really sorry. But the one on the inside I shaved, and of course the one on the inside on the other side as well. So now I have really good oil pan clearance as needed.
First we prop up the front end of the crankshaft of the B48 with the jack. And then we use a transmission jack, left and right leveling, to level to the 8 HP oil pan.
I'll save you some of the time. This is actually kind of a boring process because there's a lot of iterations that are needed to get the engine that floats with effortless movement. Wouldn't you know it? The 8 HP will be sitting in the exact same location, which is great because the same drive shaft can be used. The same transmission bracket can be used. The engine is positioned in the perfect location, and there's gobs of room up in front of the engine. So I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to start threading it in. This is going to make development of the engine brackets a lot easier because now I have this sitting exactly where I want it, and I can have the whole rest of the engine just kind of teeter-tottering on that transmission bracket. It's great. You can see here, I now have just enough latitude to easily wiggle the engine and even rotate it where it needs to be in its exact location. Let's see as I wiggle this how it affects the drive shaft and its alignment. Doing this, now see the drive shaft. How is this B48 sitting? Exactly how I want it. The only possible interferences that need to be aware of is the steering column here. There's a little nub that might be touching the oil pan. It's close, but it's not touching as of now. The oil pan to steering rack clearance is good. The oil pan to subframe clearance is very tight, so we do need to bring this up just a tiny bit before we make our brackets. And the oil pan is nice and level. We're going to be making a slightly smaller version of that, a slightly cheaper version of that for B48 for our customers. And the output of the drive shaft is perfectly in the center as well. So very important aspects of this engine swap are all being adhered to. I'm very happy with how it's sitting, and we can start working on our engine bracket positioning. Here are the two brackets that bolt onto the block. These brackets have much larger holes than necessary because we need to put offset spacers, the standoffs, in all of these in order to stand them off from the oil and coolant passages on the block. All right, so I got my two brackets made for the B48 block, and all the hardware is there. These are the standoffs that are required to install on the passenger side, and the same thing with the driver's side. The B48 is a little bit more complicated in that it's got the coolant passages. I'm using an E30 N54 bracket here, and I'm hoping that it just lines right up with that, but it isn't exactly. So if I were to just well, I'm not even gonna put that bolt on. So if I were to just hold it down flat, you'll see that it's off by a bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna change these bends a little bit on either side, and I'm going to be able to tack that on, and it's gonna sit right along this bracket really nicely. It still affords some room for this elbow to curve around where it needs to go, so that's gonna be great. This bracket will be done. Now, one of the things that's important when you're doing this, I've got everything tightened down. The two brackets on the block are tightened. The two brackets that are mounted to the motor mounts themselves are tightened. I've got good pressure from this side pushing onto this side of the block. I've got good pressure from this bracket pushing on this side of the block. Now, if I were to move the engine around left and right, it's not really moving at all. I know that the engine is being equally pressurized by both sides, such that now I know the engine is sitting exactly where it needs to be, and I can start welding up and tacking them up. Then I can take the brackets off, weld them up, gusset them, at least the prototype versions, get them back installed, and put the whole drivetrain on its own weight.
So you might be saying I skipped over the best part. Well, I wanted to give you a real detailed view of how I actually make these brackets and how I make the jig. So you need a male and a female counterpart when you do this. So you're kind of making the jig and the bracket itself concurrently. So we have to make the female version of the jig and the male version of the part, make sure that everything installs onto the block appropriately. And then from there, it's really just connecting the dots from A to B when the engine is in the right position, assuming it is. So you use cardboard cutouts in order to make things roughly where you want it. Then we can use the arc droid to cut the metal, bend it as needed because the cardboard told us which way we want to bend it. And then we kind of fine tune the metal to match where we want it to sit in application. So we tighten down all of our hardware and we start making our gusseting. Now the gusseting is also made in the same manner with the same material. And in this case, we're using 1/4-inch steel. And once everything is good, we position it in place and we start welding and tacking it all up. Welding it, they're nice strong tacks. You want to make sure that it doesn't change its position after you remove it. And then you put it back into the jig, at least that part of the jig, and you get to complete the jig. Remember, we had A to B, we had A before, now we're making B here. And that's what we're doing with this other piece that we need to weld up. So we weld that up, and we reconnect everything, take it all apart, and then we gusset the jig to make sure that the jig is something that can be producible. And now we have our entire setup done, strong, and sitting in position.
We've got our new updated transmission bracket that is going to go in place of the B58. The location for installation is exactly the same, except it's using 2 holes instead of 4, so it's going to be perfectly suited for the B48. We've got our jigs for both the passenger and the driver's side. The B48 is now fully sitting underneath and inside of the E46. It is straight as a whistle. Now listen, I updated the transmission bracket for the B48. The B58 will still apply here. It's the same transmission bracket, technically, but it's a little bit more lighter duty, good for the B48 actually. So this is an 8 HP B48 E46 bracket. The B48 is sitting really nice now. No interferences with the steering rack, no issues with the subframe. The arms look really good. These arms are really nice. What we're gonna do now is we are gonna take some pictures of it and we are going to then put it on the ground and see how it sits. All right, so the tube is in, it's nice and loose, but you know, it doesn't matter. It's just going to show what's going on here. Still a lot of room in here, a lot of room. Even though this is here, we can still fit a radiator this thick. You can see this is where the radiator would be, and the fan would be in between that. But the engine is just so far back, and I can't bring it more forward. I just can't. The oil pan is going to interfere with the subframe. It's just a matter of fact. And the big problem here is going to be this guy. That is the HVAC, the cover for the fan. It's definitely, I don't know if I can zoom in on this enough to show you. I don't think I can. Sorry, guys. Just not enough light. So that cover is going to interfere with the back side of the engine, the head. And that's this guy. It's kind of like a very heavy insulated piece. And that would need to be modified. Definitely need to be modified in order to get this thing to fit. But that's a small price to pay, it really is. It's not much else you need to do here to modify this. So let's yank this out and put in the GS6 manual transmission. Okay, looking at this is propped up. It looks like it is tucked in there in order to make this level, which is fine. Don't have a problem with that. We're gonna end up utilizing these two holes on this side and then these two holes on that side. And then we're gonna probably make some sort of angled piece that comes up on either of them because it's just tucked in so high above these frame rails that a single bent piece is just not gonna be, it's just not gonna work very well. The bending of the pieces might cost more in labor than just bending separate pieces and welding them in. So we'll probably end up going with that. So let's start making the cardboard template and go from there. Okay, so we've got our GS6 17HG transmission bracket prototype. Now, I really want to stress that this is a prototype. It looks like a mishmash, and it is. But we got our surfaces parallel to where they need to be. We've got our 4 holes lined up to different holes on the chassis than what we had for the 8 HP. This transmission is a lot shorter, meaning that the drive shaft will need to be a lot longer. Regardless, we have our 4 holes sitting here. Everything is sitting on our nice rubber mounts, nice and flat. We're going to take this off, we're going to jig it later on our own time, and we're going to productionize this set with minimal bends and minimal welds in order to make this thing also as strong as possible. It's going to look something like this when it's done, but this is really the prototype product, and this will be the production version of that product, similar style. So now that we've got this, let's take a quick look at the shifter and how that's going to be impacted. All right, now analyzing the shifter, it's pretty clear to me now why they did the shifter the way they did. If you put the Guibo on here, which is an LK 96 millimeter, this is a 96 millimeter diameter, then the shifter selector rod will actually hit it. So you need a shifter selector rod that is it kind of comes up and down. And as such, you need a shift carrier that also goes up and down. And that's what this one does. It kind of sits up in here. It'll sit in there just like that. And it rotates left and right, which is kind of nice. What we'll do is we'll get the pins in there, and we'll get the dimension to the center of this with everything positioned as is. So we'll know exactly what the design needs to be. Obviously it needs to be high. And I'll show you the selector rod and how that matches as well. So the shift carrier is installed. The selector rod is also installed, and everything spins freely. If I were to put this on, you can see why there is a design in the selector rod such that it's supposed to circumvent the guibo. In this case, it is, right? See how it's much higher? Now the problem is that, I'm gonna take this off just for clarity. We are gonna get the dimension from here to the center of that hole, and that is going to allow us to understand how far away we need to make our selector rod. But in this case, for this transmission, it is absolutely imperative that you have this angle up in order to avoid hitting the guibo. So we'll get our dimensions, and I think we'll be good to go. And we want to mark in the center of this hole here with a marker. I'm going to push this up where it belongs, sitting in place, something like that. And Dan is going to mark the center of the hole, and it's just going to so happen to sit on that shift, so the lever, right where it belongs. Good? See, we got that. There's the mark. That is the center of the mark. Now that just gives me a dimension. That's the important thing. The dimension of the rest of it is going to be just as easy. This guy's set in place. We're just going to keep that there just for fun. And this guy, now let me just make sure this is in neutral. Good. So I'm just going to place this exactly where it needs to be, right in the center. And now I'm going to tighten it down. I think that's good. Excellent. Now I can take this out. And I've got the length of my selector rod. Guys, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for watching. Next episode, we're going to be hitting up the E30 and doing this all over again. Take it easy, guys. Later.